I am very excited to announce the First Baptist Center for Ministry Training. And the idea behind this new center is the fact that I know as a repeated graduate from seminary, I know as a seminary professor for a long number of years, that there's only so much you can learn about ministry in the educational context. Sooner or later, you have to come to the local church context. Here at First Baptist Church, we have been equipping ministers of the gospel and training pastors in the context of our local church for a very long time, and this is just our latest effort to do that. The inaugural event for the First Baptist Center for Ministry Training is going to happen on January the 16th to the 19th. It is a weekend workshop, and you can come and you can see in a local church how to do leadership and revitalization, how to do biblical counseling, and how to do worship and music. There is a very limited number of spots available. The applications are due by November the 22nd. And if you would like to get more information or to apply, you can go to fbcjacksministrytraining.com. I'm Heath Lambert, and you're listening to Marked by Grace, a podcast applying the grace of Jesus to all of life. Was it wrong to attempt to assassinate Adolf Hitler? That's the question I'm answering this week on Marked by Grace. If you have a question you would like me to answer, you can send that in to markedbygrace@fbcjacks.com. That's markedbygrace@fbcjacks.com. This week, though, is a very particular question. You are asking about the ethics of the attempt to assassinate Adolf Hitler. It's a fascinating question. This podcast is dropping a week after election week in the United States of America, and there's actually been talk about Hitler in the American election. Kamala Harris, the vice president, accused Donald Trump of being like Hitler or similar to Hitler. And so Hitler is one of those persons that just lives on in our imagination as one of the darkest figures in human history. Of course, Adolf Hitler was not assassinated. He committed suicide. But the question is, in the attempt to take his life, was that a biblically acceptable position? The tension in the question comes from the fact that we know it is a sin to commit murder, but we also know that Adolf Hitler presided over an absolutely murderous regime and killed wrongfully millions of people. And so is it right or wrong to kill or to try to kill a person who behaves in such a way? Well, let me come at the answer by first telling you the story. The question is about the attempt to assassinate Adolf Hitler. There were actually multiple attempts to assassinate Adolf Hitler that started happening in the year 1944. The historical context for Germany, the Third Reich, in 1944 is that the wheels were coming off their war. Actually, the wheels were coming off their wars. The Russian invasion, Operation Barbarossa, had failed. The Normandy invasion, where the Allies were invading the continent, had succeeded. Allied air superiority was causing grave concern in the German military. The collapse of the German economy was imminent due to that air superiority and the repeated bombings. And even Adolf Hitler told Mussolini in 1944 that their position was desperate. So everybody knew Germany was in a weakened condition, even and especially the German military leadership that surrounded Adolf Hitler. There were many attempts to assassinate Adolf Hitler. There were actually many attempts to undermine his government. There were plans to kidnap him and hand him over to the Allies. There were plans to place him under arrest and try him in Germany as a war criminal. there were attempts to assassinate him, efforts to assassinate him. There were attempts to place bombs and liquor bottles on his airplane. There were attempts to put a time bomb in a conference room where he held his meetings. There were a couple of attempts to place bombs in army overcoats that would go off when he got nearby. So many attempts. This question this week is specifically about what is called the July plot, or the Army bomb plot. It was supervised by Klaus von Stauffenberg, and he used his access in the army to get close to Hitler and to bring a bomb within proximity to Adolf Hitler. And then, actually, not just to kill Adolf Hitler, he also orchestrated a highly organized plan to institute a military takeover of the government, so that in the chaos that would ensue after the death of Adolf Hitler, there could be a secure government put in place. The bomb plot did not work. The bomb went off, but before the bomb went off, the bomb, which was in a briefcase, was moved from very close to Hitler, is moved a little bit further away and on the other side of a very heavy oak table, and that absorbed the blast. Probably would have killed Hitler if it had not been moved, but it was moved. And in a weird twist of fate, Adolf Hitler survived that attempted assassination. So the issue is, however, that it failed only for practical reasons. It didn't fail for principled reasons. They didn't go, oh, this isn't the right thing to do. They believed to the end that it was the right thing to do, but it failed. And so the question is, ethically, is that acceptable? And I actually think the attempt to assassinate Hitler was morally acceptable and not sinful. In fact, I would say, I think it is morally praiseworthy. I think the people who engaged in this effort deserve our praise and our approval. I think they are heroes. But we need to explain ethically and biblically why that is the case. Let me give you 4 reasons why I think that is true. First, there is a biblical demand to enforce the sanctity of human life with death. So it is biblically permissible to enforce the sanctity of human life with death. The same word of God that says in the 6th commandment, you shall not commit murder, says in Exodus chapter 21, verse 12, whoever strikes a man so that he dies shall be put to death. Now, there are all sorts of complicating factors in the use of the death penalty. I've talked about that in another podcast. All I'm going to say here right now is that the Bible that prohibits murder makes clear that a person who has committed murder forfeits their life. So, Adolf Hitler was certainly guilty of the wrongful death, the murder of many millions of people. And in that sense, he had earned for himself the death penalty. And so because the sanctity of life is so important, when you trample on human life, you do not deserve to keep yours. That's the first reason. The second reason has to do with the intentions of those involved in the bomb plot. Now, I am not saying that there were no mixed motives for all of those involved. There were many mixed motives. There were ambitious people in the mix. Different people wanted to move in different directions when you read about this. But they all shared the legitimate goal that Adolf Hitler was absolutely corrupt, might be losing his mind, and that the German people were going to be destroyed if he was not eliminated and replaced. And so when we talk about just war theory, this is part of the ethical conversation that is related to just war theory and the legitimate use of force. One of the realities is, historically, for Christian thinking, you've got to have a legitimate goal. And it was certainly a legitimate goal to end a threat. These were not ambitious people who wanted to kill a good man just so they could have power. They wanted to kill a wicked man to preserve an entire nation and prohibit more deaths. They had that legitimate goal. So First, sanctity of human life. Second, the intentions of those involved in the plot were legitimate. Third, they did have a legitimate chance of success. This is another moral principle in just war theory. You're not allowed to engage in a fool's errand. You can't just pursue death and destruction with no hope of success. You've got to have a legitimate chance of success. And there was a legitimate chance of success in the July bomb plot. It didn't work out that way. It was not ultimately successful, but it was planned by people with power and authority, with access. And actually, when you read the history of this, which we won't go into on the podcast, there were a number of practical missteps that if different people had made different decisions, Hitler actually might have died. And if he would not have died, still the military takeover of the country still might have been a success and been able to isolate Hitler and see him be removed from power. Again, none of those things happened, but there was a legitimate chance of success on the part of the planners. And so in that sense, it was legitimate. Finally, they had a plan to control the government. The bomb plot would have been much more reckless if their only plan was to kill the leader. You kill the leader, you create all sorts of chaos, you create a vacuum in power, and who knows what's going to happen with that. Well, that was not what these plotters did. They had a legitimate plan. They were engaged in careful thinking, not just to sort of cut off the head of the government, but to secure the government and replace it with new leadership. So for all of those reasons, I believe the plot to execute Adolf Hitler, though unsuccessful, was not only morally permissible, but morally praiseworthy. I want to be very clear. That's not a blanket endorsement of all efforts at assassination, not by a long shot. Assassination is a very, very aggressive act, but Adolf Hitler was a very, very corrupt and aggressive leader. And you're asking if it was ethical to attempt to assassinate Hitler, and I'm saying, yeah, I think it was.